Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Livin The Dream podcast, where we tell you about the dreams of graduates from the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting and now how they are living that dream and what's coming up for them after. My name is Rishi Barran. I'm a course director at the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting at Full Sail University. And one of the things I enjoy the most about the job, if not the most, probably the most, is talking with our graduates who've gone on to do great things. And I've got one of them with me today, Scott Koral, who has just done a magnificent job, just as he did in his program, currently a multimedia journalist and getting more anchoring opportunities at 12 News Now, WDEF in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I got that all right, Scott? That's the name of your station, right?
Oh, News 12 now, but
News
it's
12 now.
You're in the ballpark. Hey, it's the same thing, right?
All right, 12 News Now, that is. Scott, thank you for taking time. He had a live shot tonight. He's breaking big stories, and he's still with us. Scott, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right, well, I'm going to take you all the way back to the beginning here to start off. We're going to ask our three big questions throughout the night, which are about where the dream started for you, what it's like living the dream now, and where you hope the dream takes you next. You have an extensive history. Scott is unique in the fact that he came to our program already with a career in the broadcasting industry, but he wanted to be on air, and that's what he's doing right now. I'm so proud of him that his hard work has paid off. But Scott, got to start at the beginning. Where did the dream start for you?
I was once the son of a sharecropper back in 1924. So basically it's, I'm a guy, and I think I'm unique in another way that, there's more college applicants, college students right now, and college graduates that are going to back to school later in their lives to try and start a new career or go back to the career that they really wanted to be in the first place. I am currently 50 years old. And, I think, if I go back all the way to when I was a kid, I'd wanted to be a broadcaster since I was probably about 6, maybe 7. I used to watch the CBS affiliate in Chicago, WBBM. And I wanted to be the sports version of Bill Curtis. And there's going to be a lot of people out there who have no idea who Bill Curtis is. And I will explain. So Bill Curtis, when Walter Cronkite retired from being the anchor of the CBS National News, they hired a guy, the lead anchor from the CBS affiliate in Chicago. That happened to be Bill Curtis. He was a guy I had been watching for years prior to all that. Curtis was a guy his voice was very definitive. It was unique, but he had the definitive vocals that I think everybody who is a broadcaster would love to have. But at the same time, it was elegant. And that was what I wanted to be. I just wanted to be the sports version. He was the news anchor. But I wanted to be just like that, definitive yet elegant. I don't have Bill Curtis's voice, but I think I do have more of the showmanship that I think will propel me to hopefully be great in this business and go places that I would love to go. But that's where it all started, was back in 1970s, like 77. I got to see Bill Curtis behind the scenes. I think it was a birthday present for myself, and I got a tour of WBBM studios, and I got to see Curtis and guys like Walter Jacobson. And you guys might have to look this stuff up. But there were people at WBBM in Chicago that now. So Lester Holt took over for Bill Curtis. He's now obviously NBC News main anchor for their national stuff. Jim Avila, I believe, is with NBC News now, but he went to ABC at one point, and then I think he moved over to NBC for their national news. John Quinones, who's now with ABC News, also was at that station. Tim Weigel, you may have heard of Tim Weigel, who was a sports guy for the ABC affiliate in Chicago, WLS. He was somebody who was always pretty prominent in that. And then, at WBBM, there were, Johnny Morris was the lead sportscaster. He was a former Chicago Bears wide receiver, and his wife, Jeannie Morris, was also the secondary sports anchor, but she happened to be the very first woman to ever set foot inside a men's locker room and was the first woman to do a live shot at the Super Bowl. So like those things are, to know that those were the people that I watched as a kid and to see how they did things, that was, I think, momentous for me wanting to become a broadcaster and become hopefully a good one. So that's probably where it all started. And I still look back on those times, and I still strive to be like Bill Curtis, but not Bill Curtis. I think when anybody says, oh, I want to be the next Stuart Scott or the next Dan Patrick or the next this guy or that lady or whatever, you have to realize that that's unrealistic. You need to be the best version of yourself. And you can like take some things from Stuart Scott or a Chris Berman or a Dan Patrick or whomever, Linda Cohn, Robin Roberts, those are all people I worked with when I was at ESPN. You could take things from them, but you still have to incorporate those things within your own style, within your own personality. And it's going to be an ever evolving process. You will never stop growing as a broadcaster, as a person. So be the best you. Don't be the best somebody else.
Yeah, and I agree that it's important to have those heroes to look up to, and it's essentially being yourself is molding different things you've taken from life and putting it to your own personality. I had Mike Tirico was my local, CBS local station sportscaster when I was a kid. I credit him for getting interested in it because I was luckily, much like you being in the Chicago market and the Syracuse market, we had a lot of great broadcasters. David Muir now, who's on, ABC's the lead anchor. He was one of my local guys. So I think that's a really important thing. And you took that to become yourself, and that process continues to evolve, as you said, to this day. But you went from that passion to, as you just mentioned, eventually getting to ESPN. What took you from that original passion to becoming a production assistant at ESPN?
So to be totally honest, I went to UCLA. So it was one of those things where I'm in Los Angeles, I'm doing things, and I'm working for the student radio station, KLA. And then I'm like, I really want to do something in the media. So I decided I want to do an internship with the local sports radio station that happened to be KMPC. And a lot of the guys that I worked with, again, people may never have heard of. And if they have, maybe it's just random. Maybe you've heard a game on radio and you've heard Jeff Biggs doing the play-by-play, or you've heard, who Scott St. James is. Andre Aldridge, is the pre and post game, and he does stuff during the game for the Atlanta Hawks. I used to work with him at KMPC. But two people that I worked with, and they were both behind the scenes at KMPC. One was Luis Cornetta, who ended up becoming one of the 3 program directors for ESPN Radio, and somebody that Dan Patrick knows very well, and that's Todd Fritz. He was producing the highest rated show on KMPC. And basically it's like, they ended up going to ESPN on the radio side, and they were like, Scott, do you want to come with us? It's like, yeah, but if I do, I want to do it in television, and I don't want to do it on radio. So they were like, all right, so we'll talk to the people, we'll get you the interview, but you have to nail it. It's like, fine. So I remember going to ESPN and having to do the interview with Al Jaffe. And if you have no idea who Al Jaffe is, there's plenty of things you could look it up and find out everything you want to know about Al Jaffe. The interview process there, at least with him, I don't know what it's like now, but Jaffe was a guy who would never look at you, not eye to eye, during your interview. you would sit there, he'd ask you a question, and then he'd look, I mean, any direction, he'd turn around and start, like, he would do anything to try and distract you from your answer. And that was like a tactic to see if you would, be able to, just concentrate, or, maybe you'd call him out. And, there was somebody that I remember, Lisa Finn, I'll never forget her. She, she had started, maybe it was 6 or 8 months after I did. And she was talking about her interview with Al Jaffe. And she said, I was like, so what did you do when he started looking in every direction? I said, I'm right here. You're going to look at me. You're interviewing me. I'm not in any other direction. I'm right here. So look at me when I'm talking. You're asking me questions. Look at me. I was like, wow, okay. I was like, I'm surprised you still got the job. She's like, yeah, me too. But when he interviewed me, again, he was looking in every direction. I was like, guy that likes to look people in the eye and whatever. I mean, you find those people everywhere. So I just kept going with my answers, and I passed, and they brought me in to do PA work. And from there, basically, they moved me out to Los Angeles because there was a guy who was leaving Up Close. So this was after Roy Firestone had moved on and done, like, basically it was, I think, a once a month show for ESPN for Up Close. And Chris Myers was doing Up Close. So the guy who was the PA for Up Close was leaving. They're like, Scott, you've lived in Los Angeles, and you lived not that far actually from where the show tapes. Do you want to go? It's like, yeah. So they moved me out to Los Angeles. That was about a year, and I think it was after 14 or 15, after about 14 and a half months, 15 months, something like that. And I was the guy for Up Close for a long time. Moved from Chris Myers. Then it was Gary Miller, who's now in Cincinnati. But yeah, like, those were all good times. I still have plenty of friends that I worked with back in Bristol, and wouldn't trade them for the world.
Yeah, what an experience. And you had so many things I'm sure you learned there that you take with you today into your job now. But then after that, you went on to an extensive career in television. I know you had stops in San Francisco, Salt Lake City. You were the executive producer in Rockford, Illinois, not super far enough, but not super far from where you grew up. And now you are where you are. But what was it like going through the rest of your career in television before you came to us?
I think it was one of those things where I loved doing sports. I'm just not sure, when I was doing it then. And please don't take this, for those that are listening, please do not take this as something that you will find. Everybody's different. But when I was, and I was behind the scenes at the time, and I think I had always aspired to be on air. So it was different for me. But when I was going through, even at ESPN, I think because I wasn't doing like segment producing or feature producing and things like that, I didn't feel challenged. Anybody can do a highlight. And I'm not saying that, like, there's going to be people who are just like, I can't really do one. And really, technically, anybody can create a highlight. Anybody can read a highlight, but it takes a lot to make it into a story that somebody wants to tell. I was in a position where I think as I grew, I got tired of me writing the stories that somebody else would tell. And maybe that's an ego thing. And if it is, I'll accept that. But I think that was where I think that brought me to Full Sail, where I wanted to start telling the stories that I was doing all the work for. To me, don't do 85 or 90 or 95 or 99% of the work. And then that 1% where you might get the credit, you don't. And that's where I was doing, like I said, 85 to 90% of the work. And yet the 10% of actually putting it on the air and somebody else is reading it, well, they're getting the credit for it. I'm just looking like the schmuck on the sideline. And that's where, for me, all that took me to being at Full Sail. So I had, 20 years of experience behind the scenes that now, as a producer, as an EP, as a PA and AP, like I rose through the ranks to get to this
You
point.
got all the initials, Scott.
Yeah.
All of them.
For those that don't know, PA is production assistant, AP is associate producer. Producer can also be called line producer. That's where you're actually in the seat and you're directing everything as to how the stories are being put in the rundown. And then, as they appear on the air, sometimes you're killing it, sometimes you're floating it, sometimes you're adding more as things go on and breaking news. But a producer is sometimes also called a line producer, and EP is executive producer. So you're basically overseeing all the shows and trying to make sure that everything is done the way it's supposed to be done. So the only things I really haven't done are assistant news director and news director, and truly having the title of anchor. But I would say that that's one thing. I can't be alone. I can't be the only one who would ever say, okay, well, I wanted to be the one that's telling all the stories. But there's a big difference because I had to go through 20 years of being behind the scenes and doing all that before I truly said, yeah, I'm tired of this. There's going to be people that are at Full Sail now that may not have that attitude, that may not have the experience of being able to say, well, it's okay to have so-and-so read this story, even though I did a lot of the work. And that's great if that's the way you feel. I just had all that experience knowing that I felt like I was always being asked to do Superman work and being looked at like I was less than Clark Kent. So, like I said, I know that may sound like an ego thing, but I'll take it because that's.
Well, generally, I would say, Scott, there's as many good people as are in this industry on air. I would say everybody's got the ego a little bit, right? You got to have a little bit of that at some point. Almost everybody I've met. So there's nothing wrong with that at all. But it's really cool to hear how that hunger not only never died in you for this dream that you had when you were a kid, but it seemed like it grew and grew as time came on. And at some point you're like, let's go all in on this. So you mentioned coming to Full Sail. What made that decision for you that Full Sail was the place to do it?
Funny you asked that. So let's all be honest here. So this is gonna be good. When the students and whomever else listens to this or watches it, this is gonna be fun. So the original thing that I wanted to do when I wanted to become a broadcaster was I actually applied for the online version of the Cronkite School of Broadcasting, which is at Arizona State. One of the reasons why I did that, so now she's the dean of the Cronkite School, Paula Bovin.
She replaced my former instructor, who was, or a couple of them that used to work there. So yeah, Paula Bovin.
But I worked with her over at KMPC. So sometimes it's those connections that really put you in a position to get the things that you want. So I asked her first. I was like, look, that's where I want to go. I obviously want to do it online because I own a home now, and I want to make sure that I can at least stay here, but get all the things that I want. It's like, do you have an online program where I can become an MMJ? And she was like, well, not now. I was like, okay. So there goes that. So the next one was getting in touch with Gus, who I knew over at ESPN. And I was like, what can you guys do for me? He's like, apply for the program. We'll make you into something. So I applied. I think I worked hard, but again, I think it's different when you have a lot of experience behind you, because there's going to be people, I'm sure, that are first-time students or coming in at 20, 21, 18, 19 years old. And some of the stuff that you're going to be asked to do, it's going to be easy. Some of the stuff you're going to be asked to do, you're going to be like, what the heck is all this? So like, I think for me, I'd understood what Gus and a lot of the instructors, obviously you're one of them for my final class. But I think all that stuff was easier to me because I'd seen it all before. I'd been a part of breaking news, and granted, a lot of it was, on the production side, or being a line producer. And I felt the most comfortable doing breaking news. Just, hey, I guess the best way to put it is, and this is going to sound kind of weird, but producing breaking news is a lot like being a young quarterback who's just transitioning from college to the NFL. You just got to read and react. What's going on, and then just let it all hang out. And I felt like literally I could look back on it and be like, I was Mitch Trubisky. I literally was Mitch Trubisky. Just, can I make one read and just let it fly? I can do that. But I was the only, there was a time when one of the producing stints that I had was in Salt Lake City. And there was breaking news going on. I think it was in Portland. I think they were having there was a shooting at the mall, and it had been going on for a while. And they actually took somebody out of the producer chair because she wasn't and this is no offense to her. She's actually a really, really nice person. And she's producing, I think at the same station. But they took her out of the chair because she wasn't able to handle the breaking news. And they're like, Scott, go in there and take over. So I took over and handled the breaking news. And basically a lot of that is, okay, well, something's happening. So let's go to it during the show, and let's make sure we go back to it at the end of every segment and in bump with it in the beginning of the segment. So we know this is still going on while we do the rest of the news. So basically that's what I did, and it worked. So, I think it is just, it's hard when you come with so much experience before you hit, in this case, Full Sail, or wherever people happen to go. Things come easy. And I think that was more of my experience at Full Sail. It wasn't that I wasn't working hard. I was still trying to enterprise stories. I was still trying to, I'm sure that there are students who, go through the classes and see some of the videos that I've made for, my classes back in the day.
Yeah, they watch it every month in my class.
Okay. And some of them are good and some of them are not so good. I can look back at things now and I can be like, oh, wow. I think I've always had the showmanship, but now I have a little bit more of that grittiness where I'm in the middle of the muck. And that's the one thing that you just won't get at Full Sail, at Arizona State, at Mississippi State, at any journalism school that you go to, because you just have to be in it. You got to be with a news director who's going to yell at you and put his foot deep in the booty before you start understanding, oh my gosh, it's different. I'm not doing this for a grade. I'm doing this live. There's no second and third or fourth or 10th or 20th takes on this. You got one chance. You better make it count. And, I still struggle with that a little bit, but, again, I'm 4 months into this on air side.
It takes time, Scott. It takes time to get through all of that. But first of all, the last person I expect you to compare yourself to tonight was Mitch Trubisky, but there we go. By the way, Scott and I are both Chicago Bears fans, and I know Scott's not a huge Mitch Trubisky fan, so that's why I say that. But we're talking to Scott Koral with News 12 Now. I got it right that time, right? News 12 Now in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And Scott, you mentioned kind of having a different outlook than a lot of people in our program with all the experience you have, but why was it beneficial for you to come to Full Sail as you chased your on-air dreams?
I think, to be totally honest, it was one of those things where, when I got with Gus, it was one of those things I tried to make it as, here's a guy who's known me, worked with me. And, I worked with Dan Patrick himself when I was at ESPN. I worked with Jeff Schetzel. Like, there are people that are instructors over at Full Sail that I was like, okay, so I don't, because they have jobs too, and they want to make sure that all these kids, not just myself, but everybody gets to a point where they're successful within this business. So I just wanted to be around people who, for lack of a better term, aren't going to blow smoke up my ass. That was literally the words that I took to my wife and said, that's why I chose Full Sail.
And what did you get out of it once you were there that added to what you already knew?
I think it was more of just refining a lot of my own skills. Like, I came in there not really I'd been on air before, but it was always in like video podcast form. You're pretty loose with everything. There's no real set schedule. There's no real plan as to how you research things or how you do things. And I had done, and I think I had showed you some of that stuff when I did things.
Midway Minute, baby.
Midway Minute, Kevin Kadick. So like, I had done some of those video things, and we did pre and post game stuff with the Bears. And, I took that very seriously, and it was not that Kevin didn't. Kevin was very serious about it too. He actually wanted it to become something that he would get paid for. He's now parlayed that into, it's a website, I believe it's called allchgo.com. And now, like, they've been able to hire like people from the Sun-Times and the Tribune, and they're making podcasts and video podcasts and things like that. And it's all about Chicago sports. And if there was ever like a great opportunity for me, it would have been doing that. But that didn't happen until I'd already gotten to Chattanooga. And I think if I was ever going to be good at doing those kinds of things, I got to start getting good at doing this. But yeah, I had done Midway Minute, and like I said, it was loose, but I took it very seriously. I used to I could probably print out like some of the research that I did for all that, and it was like 3-4 pages worth, and I would like highlight it, and I would, weirdly enough, I actually used the some of the NFL fonts that they used and things like that, and I made it into something that he ended up parlaying into the position that he's in now, and more power to him. I mean, he was the brains behind all that stuff, and really wanted to, I think, make that into something, and he did. And if I had any hand in it, then I'll take a little bit of that credit. But that was a thing. You go from being loose to being basically, it's not tight, but it's more of you're tightening up everything that you do. Thinking, okay, I've got one chance to do this. I can't do the see. There is none of that. You have to know what you wanted to say, and you're going to have to say it. Sometimes that is a little bit of memorization, and sometimes it's writing it down on a notepad, and you give 1 point on a live shot, and you look down. Okay, there's my next point. I'm going to give you that one, and then there's another point. Okay, I'm going to give you that, and then you end your live shot, and then you've already you start realizing, oh my gosh, I just put in a minute 15 or a minute 20 just in doing this live shot and 3 points. So, and then also actually the very first time that I did, that I actually said my name on air for WDEF, I reversed News 12 Now, and I said 12 News Now.
Like I did.
Yeah. And
so now you don't feel so bad, right?
No, the anchors actually were like, Scott, hey, News 12 Now. Like, yeah, isn't that what I said? no, it's not what you said. And then I went back in the script. I was like, ooh, that's not what I said.
Scott, we had a place where I worked in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and they kept changing their tagline because they thought that, oh, we're, you know how stations that are not doing well in the ratings, they always have to do something different, right? So we went from CBS 21 News to WHP CBS 21 News. We had to say it every sig out was for WHP CBS 21 News Harrisburg, I'm Rishi Barran. I mean, like that took up half my package,
Right.
So it's annoying, but you got to get it right. You're right.
And Tennessee's a little different. Things that you would think are pronounced one way are actually pronounced another. You'd look at a word like or a city. I was down in what you would look like and say, oh, that's Lafayette. Well, here it's Lafayette. There's a city in Tennessee, or a town in Tennessee, that has the same Italian spelling of, Milan, but here, Milan.
We had that in Missouri too. Milan, Missouri, baby.
Yeah, it's odd, but I'm getting used to it because I can't. There's no way I'm going to go to Milan and say, in Milan like that. No. Like I will die before I do that.
We had a anchor, and we'll not tell you who it was, but that on his first day in Syracuse mispronounced Bayheim. That's not good. You're going to be in trouble.
No.
Yeah.
No, you can't do
No.
That's like calling, let's say okay, I'll use a bear, Walter Payton, Walter Payton. What? No, you can't do that. How do you do that? I'm in Chattanooga, their sports teams are, it's kind of a mixed bag. Obviously we have the Lookouts here, which is the minor league affiliate of the Reds. And obviously we do things with them and about them. But major league team, they care more about the Braves because they're an hour and 45 minutes away than they do about the Reds. And, there's Reds that are actually at the Lookouts today. I believe their first game, I think, is tomorrow for minor league baseball. So, you have a lot of things there. They also enjoy the Titans, which Nashville is about 2 hours and about 10 minutes away, but it's the closest major league franchise that we have. Basketball, it's the Grizzlies. They're 4 hours away. A lot of people might think, oh, well, when at the Hawks, Tennessee is Tennessee. Yeah. So, you're going to root for UT Knoxville. You're going to root for UTC. You might root for Vanderbilt, but you might also, because North Georgia is in our viewing area, might also vote for the Dogs. Just to get into Alabama literally takes about 15 minutes from where I live. So you might root for the Crimson Tide. As a matter of fact, our main anchor for the evenings, Andrew Harrison, and our sports guy, Rick Nyman, both went to the University of Alabama. So, sports is a mixed bag. And in the SEC, you pretty much root for the SEC. You're not going to come down to SEC country and be like, oh yeah, I really enjoy Oregon. Nobody says that. You will never hear that. I will, just because, not that I'm an Oregon fan, but I went to UCLA. I did work for Ohio State. So I'm going to root for those two teams before I root for anybody else. But
you're right. You got to know your local market and what they want. And that's a huge part of the job, because it's not about you, it's about them, right? And what they're looking for. And that's what you're doing now, Scott. You're creating content for your local market and doing an excellent job at it. As he just mentioned, he's only been there about 4 months. He's already been getting multiple anchor opportunities and has been one of the lead reporters for them. It's just awesome to see his growth. So I ask you, Scott, you waited 20 years in this business for this. Now you're on air. What's it like living the dream now for you?
Every day's a new day. There's going to be, and here's the thing, everybody's going to be like, oh, I'm so happy I did this. There's going to be days that you are going to want to go to bed and never want to wake up. It's it can be that cutthroat. I think doing it for doing it for news, I think makes you into a better journalist. there are plenty of news directors who will hire for an MMJ or a news reporter that want sports guys, because a lot of them will have a little bit of showmanship. A lot of them will have like research skills and things like that. They may not understand the news per se, but they'll have the on-air kind of flair that you need to do this job fairly well. So, I think living the dream is tougher than I think anybody would imagine. You don't get the help that you want. And this is not anything against the news directors or anything like that. It's just, at some point you have to be on your own and you have to enterprise your stories. And when I say enterprise your stories, you have to come up with stories that should be elite. That's that's the one thing that I think you want. And that's been my attitude, I think, since I started. I want to be the lead story every night, period. I don't want to do garbage stories. I don't want to do I started at WDEF in December. And one of the very first stories that I ended up doing was a Christmas story. And there was an area out in, not that anybody will have any idea where this is, but it's called Hickson. And in this neighborhood, they had, it was a group of homeowners who all banded together and made their houses into the Grinch that stole Christmas. And I'm not kidding, this was 4 or 5 blocks worth of homes that did all of this. That's pretty impressive. So when I went out, I shot the story. It was raining that night. It was dreadful. But I did the story, and the way that I wanted to write it a lot like Dr. Seuss.
Great idea.
So I did that story, and after you put it together, and then you put it into on-air form, and then for us, we also have to write the web story. It ended up, and you ended up putting the video into the web story. It was the #1 story in all of December, and even was the #1 story I think for the first 3 weeks of January. It was that crazy.
Before you continue with that story, that shows how important it is to be memorable, right? That's what I say pretty much in all my classes every month. First thing, be memorable. And because you took that creative approach to it, I mean, is it a little bit gimmicky? Sure, but it gets people's attention, right? If you're going to do a story on the Grinch, why not go all in on it? And I'm glad you did that. So continue.
It's just one of those things where I think you have to be happy with what you're doing.
The suspect in Tuesday's attack on a New York
and I don't think of it as what would I like. Well, I do to a certain degree. I don't like to think of it as what would I like to see, because what I want to see is going to be completely different from what the general public is going to want to see. But I'm okay, here's
the charge he's facing. His attorney cautioned against a rush to judgment.
Initial press and police
stole Christmas, and you're seeing all these people coming from literally everywhere. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But you're seeing a whole bunch of people coming from everywhere to tour all these homes.
2 hours later,
And
subway station in Brooklyn.
I felt like I had to get that spirit. So I had to let the spirit dictate what the story was going to end up being, and not what I wanted the story to be or what somebody else wanted the story to be. You have to do it in what the spirit of the story and just is. So I can go from doing a story like that to the story I did today about, I'm learning this stuff as I go. But the drug isotonitazine, that's what it is. Isotonitazine.
You've got it. Yeah.
It's the new designer drug that's more potent than fentanyl. And I have to I had the DEA reach out to me about it. So it's one of those things where you start learning what's going on in your own neighborhood, what's going on in your own city, what you want to look out for, but also I want Chattanooga to grow. I want Chattanooga to not be a city where people think, oh, well, it's crime ridden, or, oh, it's this, it's economically depressed, it's that, or whatever. I want this place to grow, and I want to be somebody that the general public can say, I can trust that guy. He seems like he's a pretty decent guy. I want to talk to him. If you're going to be a sports reporter, a sports anchor, a news reporter, a news anchor, whatever it is that you're going to be, that's the one thing that you want. I can be the most disrespected journalist in all of Chattanooga or wherever, but if people think that they can trust me, I've won. And that's what I'm starting to get, just 4 months in. I forget who told me this, but there was a study done. I'm not kidding. Actually, may have been when I went on that first interview that I told you about when I was in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And it would have been for an anchor position. And the one thing she said was, when you are at a particular station, people don't start to trust you until you're there at least a year, and preferably for 2 years. That's one of the reasons why, when you do get a contract, it's generally for 2 years. It's to try and keep you there so that you can gain that momentum so everybody will trust you. Well, here I am, I'm 4 months in, and I got people reaching out to me, but hey, it's so crazy. I did a story. What was it? Was it earlier this week? Monday. It was Monday. Sorry, some of these things start running together after a while. So there was a woman that wrote into us. It wasn't necessarily to me, but it was into WDEF. And not that, look, some of this stuff is going to be kind of convoluted in from where you live, or your perspective on things. So you may live in an area where raising chickens in your backyard isn't a big deal. But I live in a city. Like, Chattanooga is a city. You can do it in Atlanta, you can do it in Milwaukee, you can do it in certain areas, but in Chattanooga, there's limits as to like the amount of property that you can do it and raise chickens, and then like you have to have things to code so that you can have the chickens. Well, here in Chattanooga, it's a little much. Within the city limits, to raise chickens, you have to own 5 or more acres of land. Well, in Chattanooga, nobody in the city limits, there are probably about 5 or 6 houses in all of Chattanooga where you have 5 or more acres of land. So there were people, and like I said, this one lady wrote into us. She was raising chickens as pets for basically her family. It's her husband, and 2 kids. But they had 1 acre of land. And it wasn't like the biggest property or anything like that, but her kids loved the hens. It was all 10 hens. You couldn't have a rooster, which I totally get because they're loud and they're annoying and it's constant, cockadoodle doing. But they were raising the 10 hens as pets. It was kind of cute. I was in the middle of all of them. They didn't peck or anything at me. And it didn't smell. It was actually kind of well kept. But she's like, I need your help. So they sent me to do this story. And I was like, okay, well, let me see what I can do. So, I interviewed her. I shot some of the stuff of the home and the hens and the kids, and all of them playing together and things like that. That was great. So then I went to the city. Like right after that, I called the city regional planning commission guy, and he was like, okay, so tell me about the situation. Told him about the situation. He ended up looking into it. He's like, all right, I'll be around at about 1:30. Just come on down and I'll interview you over at the planning commission office. Cool. So interviewed him. It turned out that I guess the councilwoman for the lady who actually emailed us watched this. The city council chair watched the story, and obviously the regional planning commission watched the story. The next day was a city council meeting. The woman who originally emailed us and the guy that I interviewed both were there. They met with the city council chair and they gave her an extension and said, hey, we're going to vote on this in July. So, you have your extension until then. I think we're going to lower the amount of land that you need to raise chickens in your backyard. And I was like, you know what? That's a win.
Yeah, definitely.
That's exactly what you want.
Yeah, it's amazing what can be done through this job, right? And we think about it, and you're in news as opposed to a lot of us that are deeply into the sports part of it right now. But same thing can happen with sports. There's a big difference that you make in people's lives, whether it's actual tangible results like you're talking about, or if it's just putting a smile on somebody's face for a night that made them feel better because they got to watch your show. It's all really important stuff. Now you mentioned, go ahead.
Just one thing real quick. Don't forget, I'm from Chicago. We don't do this kind of stuff. Come on. Like we sit there, we chickens in your backyard. That's left for the farmers back in, way out 75 miles away out by Peoria or Joliet or something. That's
Sure.
That's not for us.
Yeah.
That's, so like for me to know the kind of person that I am, to do this story and to have made a difference in her life, and then hopefully potentially a lot of other people in the Chattanooga area who have the same problem. That's what I want. That's fulfilling for me. So all right, I'm done.
It's a great story, though. I love it. Now, you mentioned earlier how having your background as a producer in production and all that helped with school. And we talk to our students all the time about how getting involved on the other side of the camera, if you want to be on camera, assists you with your on-air dreams. How has that experience helped you now that you are on air?
You know what producers are looking for. Like you just do, because you've been on that side of it. So you're just like, okay, so, like I'll go in now, and I'm not saying that like our producer's bad or anything like that. But I can go in now and be like, okay, hey, so here's what I would do. I would, put this in as a vo-sot vo, but it's going to be a double sot. And so just so so that, you don't get surprised when you see it as a double sot, just know that that's the way it's going to be. Oh, okay. I will put, why don't you put the package at 5:30 and maybe the vo-sot at 6, and then, or, if you need to switch, you can do it that way. Or, hey, I need to be live in the 6th, and or I did wraparounds over at the place where my story was. So, I'm not necessarily going to go live, but I'm going to do, I'm at least going to give the wraparounds for the story out there. So at least I don't, at least there's the appearance that I'm live or semi-live with that. So like you kind of already know, it helps you going into stories. I think it helps you understand what they're going to need as producers. And sometimes it's the anchors that are the producer of the show. You're starting to see that a lot more actually at stations. So I think having that experience really gets you ahead of the game when you're actually on the air as an MMJ or a sports reporter. You just understand what exactly is needed. And I think that a lot of producers are grateful that you can already be like, yeah, I'm going to need 2 minutes for this. And like literally a lot of my stories, and like, it's the worst thing you can do to, they like stories to be 1:30 or less. Sure, I'm not going to lie, but I'm very thorough with what I do. And if the best story is going to be told in 2 minutes, guess what? They're getting a 2-minute story and they're going to like it because it's so thorough and it's good. And so far I haven't had an issue. So that's, like to me, you keep going until it doesn't work anymore.
Well, that's why making friends, whether it's your producer or the person running prompt or the person running camera, is important, because when you've built collateral in your sense with the quality of your work, but also on a personal level, then they're going to be more likely to allow you to slide a little bit on that if you don't do that.
No, and that's absolutely true. And here's the thing, like our station, we actually have high schoolers that are working with us too. And I think that's the one thing that maybe was also good for me to know, as to go through the PA and the AP and being a producer and then obviously an executive producer. I'm not saying I always acted like the best guy, or I was always like the happiest, or that I was always thinking about making friends and stuff like that when I was back then. But I always felt like I was just never in a position to really mentor anybody or think that, I could have those things that, that joy, and be able to teach somebody else about how to do that job well and make them feel welcome. And I think that's one of the things that I've taken into account now. Again, I'm older, I'm 50 years old, and I've seen all those things in the business. We have high schoolers working with us, as I just said, but they won't necessarily talk to all the other reporters, but they will come talk to me because they're able to laugh with me. They're able to joke with me. They're able to like when I need to be serious, they know, oh, okay, he's being serious. Yeah, let me make sure that I take this. And while some of it is teaching moments, it's always, teaching moments and getting them to see and share in the same joy that you have. So I feel like I'm a much better, not just MMJ, but also as a person.
Yeah. It's great if you can put those hand in hand, right? And that's what we try to do at the school too, right? We try to build everybody not only into a better broadcaster, but into a better human being who's more ready for the world when they leave. And you decided to take the news path. I know you were looking at jobs in both news and sports, but I know that you were excited to jump on the opportunity. It sounds like it's been really good for you. For people who want to be in sports, like you still do on a lot of levels, give us your sell right now on why taking a news job can help them with that goal.
I think you have to look at it as, how can I be a better journalist? And it's not saying that you can't be one as a sports journalist, but I will say one of the things that you can, that you don't sometimes get as a sports journalist, that you can get as a news journalist, is that trustworthy factor. Sports, they're just like, oh, well, it's fun, it's happy, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yay, wee. So, you don't get that all the time, obviously, in news, but it's when you start looking at, okay, how do I want to tell this story? And you do it as a news person. I can go right now and do a sports profile. I've even asked some of the sports people. I was like, look, Cole Strange he's a graduating center for the football team here in Chattanooga, UT's Chattanooga. And he's been heavily linked to actually a few different NFL teams, one of them being the Steelers, another one being our Bears, and extremely heavily linked to the Bears. So I was like, look, I really want to do a profile on Cole Strange. Would you guys allow me to do it? And they're like, well, it's not that we wouldn't want you to do it, but we have sports people for that. But if we can't do it, if you can set something up and we can't do it, go ahead. So like, I'm working for that, but they also trust me and know that I know he can do it. Like, the success will be there and it'll be a good story. And I think that's where you want to be a sports person. Start understanding how to tell the story first. Start understanding what's needed to tell a good story, because sometimes it's not just, here's what happened. Because I can get any idiot on the street to tell me what happened for a story. I need you to tell me why this is important. Why should my mother, granted, she's passed away, but thinking about it this way, why should my mother watch this story that isn't even in her jurisdiction? It's not nowhere, she can't watch it, but she might be able to look at it on the web. Why should anybody care? If you can make somebody care with your story, it doesn't have to be news, it could be sports too. You can make somebody care, you have then won, and that you've created a great story. That's why, to me, news is also a great way to look at that. Plus, I will say this, and I think that this is where, I mentioned earlier that I didn't feel like sports was a challenge for me. And that's when I started making the transition over to news. And granted, that was before I became a local producer in Tucson. That was where I first started my local news producing career. You start looking at things differently. You may have been really interested in sports, and just like I was, I didn't care about politics. I didn't care about religion. I didn't care about any of that. And now, it's not that I care necessarily about it, but I understand it. And because I've been in different places, Tucson, Memphis, Salt Lake, San Francisco, I've been in Rockford, Bristol. I've been in so many areas and lived in so many places, New York City. I can now say I realize how a lot of the nation actually thinks. And I can do like the same things that you would do in LA, you wouldn't do in Salt Lake. The things that you would do here in Chattanooga, you couldn't do in Memphis. And you start to understand all that, but you start to understand that there is a collection of people who think in this particular way or that particular way. And because of that, you start understanding I need to tailor my story to this section of people or that section of people. And that's why sometimes being a news broadcaster is really good for then going into sports broadcasting.
Yeah, and target audiences, you brought that up. Obviously, we do that with the rundown rationales, a really important thing. All right, Scott, what's the next dream you're chasing now?
Next dream I'm chasing, I guess it would probably be to actually be an anchor. It's one of those things where, being a sports anchor is great. But I feel like if I'm a news anchor, and I know you know this, Rishi, like this is not something that will be a strange concept to you and to probably all the instructors over at Sail. The thing that I think people don't understand is you will end up, if you end up as a news anchor, you can write your ticket anywhere, doing anything for your future.
Definitely.
And it wasn't like this was something that I really, like, I didn't aspire to become a news anchor. Yes, I wanted to be the next Bill Curtis, but I wanted to be the sports version of Bill Curtis. But you start going through this business and you start looking at how can I be the best version of myself? And I think I told you this before I even left your class, if I'm not mistaken. I always thought that I would be a better anchor than I would be a reporter. So while I've had a lot of success being a reporter for WDEF, they're grooming me to become an anchor. So they see something in me where if you're an anchor at a position or at a station, and they see you as a lead anchor for, whatever it is, one show, the noon, even if it's just the noon show, that's a show that, like, basically it's your family and friends that are going to be watching, or your grandma or something like that. But if you become the lead anchor for a particular show, well, now you've got you have the station's backing, and then they start seeing you to do other opportunities. Maybe then it's the 5 o'clock show or the 6 o'clock show or the 11 o'clock show, or maybe you have the personality to do the morning show. Those are things that you really want. You want to become, an anchor. If you want to be on air, you want to become an anchor. But be a reporter first, because then you'll start learning how to tell stories so that you can then, when you're an anchor, tell them even better.
Amen to that. And great points all around, Scott. And yeah, news anchoring, that's where the money is too. So if you want the money, you might want to do that.
Cool.
All right, this brings us to the final segment. We're running low on time here, but we're going to go through what I call our dream sequence. So I'm going to say dream this, dream that, and this is kind of rapid fire, Scott. The first one's going to be a little bit more involved than the other ones, but I'm going to go through 7 things, and you just give me your response, top of the head, what you got. All right. Okay. All right. First one, dream Bears linebacker. And what I mean by that is you can give me the intelligence of one guy, the feet of another guy, the hitting of another guy. So go ahead.
Honestly, I think the ferocity of Dick Butkus, the athleticism, and I love Roquan Smith. Absolutely love him. And I think probably they both played at the same time, and one was a middle linebacker and the other one was the weak side linebacker. But I loved the camaraderie, as well as I think the all-pro play of Brian Urlacher and Lance Briggs. Like they just, I love Mike Singletary and things like that, but such intelligence and such athleticism, like they just brought it all together. And it was just, I think if you have all four of those things, and here's the thing, all that stuff translates to everything that you're going to do as a sports or news broadcaster. You want to be ferocious. You want that lead story. You want to be motivated, and you want people to know that you're motivated to get that lead story. You want to have the brains to be able to research the story and be like, I want to make sure I get to the bottom of this so that I don't have anybody coming back at me going, yeah, I don't understand. You want to tell it the whole way through. Athleticism doesn't necessarily translate to a lot within actually doing the job, but being able to be flexible in your thinking is a great skill to have as a broadcaster, because sometimes you're thinking that you're going to go into a story thinking one way and it ends up turning into another. I love it when I go into a story being pleasantly surprised that it has legs when I originally thought this is going nowhere. So those are things that you really all that stuff can translate into being a broadcaster too.
I love that. That was so good, Scott. I'm going to end it right there, because you took the Bears linebackers and turned them into what you can do to be an outstanding broadcaster. So thank you. That's a great analogy. I'm going to have to play that for my class all the time so that they know. you become a great Bears linebackers lead to success in broadcasting. So Scott, last thing before we wrap up then, what advice do you have to everyone chasing their dream that's in our school, whether they're 19 years old like some or 50 years old like you were when you came to us?
Don't give up. I think that was one of the things that was probably maybe the key to why I got to where I am now. I felt like I was always in the shadows. When I was a producer and an AP and a PA and things like that, yes, I was growing and I was starting to understand the business, but I wasn't a guy that, and I'm not saying I love the limelight. That's not who I am. What I do like is to shine, to have my light shine on whatever it is that I'm doing. So if you are a person that wants to be on air, do whatever you can to be great on air. If you want to be the best producer, and let me tell you, there are some excellent producers out there. Be the best producer you can. Learn that side of it, because there's a lot that goes into production that people don't understand. And if you can be a good producer, you can also make good broadcasters. Just by being a producer, you can end up making people into better broadcasters. So learn everything that you possibly can. Take it all in, soak it like a sponge, and be great at whatever it is that you want to do. Plus, I think when you're going through things, you're going to end up knowing what you like and what you don't like. So take those things into account. Watch other people when they do things, because let me tell you something, there's always somebody who's better than you, and you can always learn something from those people. So take everything that you can. The devil is in the details. Take every little detail that you can and find ways to either incorporate it or understand that these don't need to be incorporated into your own styles and your own motivations.
Well said, Scott. And I'm going to end with what you would always end your discussion posts and everything you wrote to me in class with, a Michael Jordan quote: "What starts with hard work ends in champagne." And I'm glad you're living your champagne moment now as an outstanding MMJ and anchor at WDEF in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And we'll see where you head next. Scott, thank you very much for joining me today here on the Livin The Dream video and audio podcast. We'll have another special guest for you soon here. Always enjoy it. And for the rest of you, keep on living the dream.